Disclaimer, this presentation was produced and funded in whole with federal funds from the U.S. Department of Education under contract number GS00F347CA with the American Institute for Research, AIR. Carolyn Lipia serves as the contracting officer's representative. The content of this presentation does not necessarily reflect the views or policies of the U.S. Department of Education, nor does the mention of trade names, commercial products, or organizations imply endorsement by the U.S. government. Again, welcome to today's Links Universal TA event. I'll introduce Marcella Movet, who's the moderator of today's event.
Thanks, Long, and thanks to all of you for joining us for today's webinar, Back to Basics Lesson Planning. Today is September 28th, 2022. On the next slide, I wanted to tell you a little bit about our Universal Technical Assistance webinars in case you are not familiar with them. So today's session is part of our Links Universal Technical Assistance Wednesday webinar series. These are held the last Wednesday of every month. So please feel free to put those on your calendar if you do not have those there. This monthly series covers topics that matter most to the field with the intent of supporting states in building their capacity in important areas. All of our webinars are recorded and are available on the Links YouTube channel. Before we jump in and hear from our fantastic presenters, I wanted to share with you a few resources that are available through Links in hopes that these will support you in continuing to build your capacity in this area. The first that I wanted to mention to you is through our Links Learning Portal. It's a self-paced online course called Differentiated Instruction and Lesson Planning. We also have, through our Links State Resources page, two items. We have the Teaching the Skills That Matter Toolkit and Teaching Excellence in Adult Literacy, also known as TEAL. Last but not least, if you'd like to continue the conversations that you start today, you should check out our a group in our Links community called Teaching and Learning. Has a great resource for you there as well. And you'll see at the bottom of the screen, we have 3 QR codes, one for accessing the Learning Portal, one for accessing the Federal Initiatives page, which is where you'll find those Links State Resources, and a QR code for joining a community group. So I encourage you to check all of those Links resources out. And with that, I think we're going to get started with introducing our presenters for today. So the first person that you'll hear from today is Patsy Egan, who is the Director of At.the ABE Teaching and Learning Advancement System, which is housed in the Hamline University in St. Paul, Minnesota. At.the provides professional development in Minnesota's adult education workforce. Also with us today is Donna Varzon Parker. In her current role as Curriculum Instruction and Assessment Policy Coordinator with the Massachusetts Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, Adult and Community Learning Services Office, Donna is responsible for providing curriculum, instruction, and assessment policies for the elementary and secondary education funded adult education programs and working closely with the statewide curriculum and instruction professional development providers to implement professional development that is data-driven, relevant to adult educators, and likely to affect student outcomes. And with that, enough from me. I'm going to turn it over to Patsy to talk to us a little bit about best practices for lesson planning. Patsy?
Thank you, Marcella. Well, I applaud Links for nailing this topic. Like, this is such an important topic for the field and so much on the minds of our teachers and leaders across the field in all of our states. So I'm glad to share a little bit of national perspective and also a little bit of what's happening in the great state of Minnesota, where I'm joining you from. So first of all, you'll see on the next slide that like lesson planning is no easy task. Like, we know this, right? And so as Long's going to bring up some pictures of very shiny shiny, happy educators doing all sorts of important things. So their students are engaged in learning and it looks so easy. And yet we know that it isn't, right? And so we want to take some time today to think through what goes into that and how can we support teachers in the field. So we know that our colleagues are very much invested in their student success and they really want to make a difference in their students' lives. And that's why they do this work, right? No one grows up to be an adult educator. We fall into this work from various places. And so people, I think, who come to this work come to it with big hearts, and they also bring to it big dreams for their learners. And we want our students to really fully participate in their communities, to have meaningful, family-sustaining work. And of course, teachers need to develop lessons that help their students get to whatever's next in their lives. But it's also super duper complicated, right? So as we see, these scenes from adult education, they don't just happen. In fact, it requires thoughtful planning. So let's dig into some of the intricacies here. So on the next slide, we'll think a little bit about what we know. What we know, of course, is that careful planning is a good idea, right? That's no mystery. So my colleague Betsy Parrish writes in her book, learners who feel that there is a purpose and direction in a lesson are more likely to participate in class and contribute to discussions. And careful planning also builds teacher confidence, which in turn inspires confidence in the learner. So absolutely true, right? And also super hard to pull off. So there is a tension, I think, between what we know is true, that thoughtful planning is obviously best practice, and also the reality of daily classroom work. Similarly, like we know that getting a side salad as opposed to fries is the right thing to do, and yet there are lots of reasons why we don't do that every time. So let's do a little bit of a reality check here on the next slide, and I invite you to find your keyboard and find your chat box. And right away, I'd love to hear from everyone here. What are some barriers to thoughtful lesson planning to teachers in your state? Because lots of things keep us from doing very careful, thoughtful lesson planning every day. So take your moment and type into the chat box time. Yep. So let me hear from several others about what is getting in the way. What are the challenges preventing instructors from planning well? We'll take a moment here. Student schedules, difference in goals not matching student goals, background in education or lack thereof, last minute changes. I keep seeing time, not knowing what a good lesson plan looks like, inexperience with lesson planning, lots of levels to plan for. Yep, for sure. Unpredictability of student attendance. Yeah, I appreciate that comment as well. Great. Anything else? All right, well, on the next slide, you'll see yes to all that. Not enough time in the day, for sure. Our teachers are strapped, right? And sometimes they are not necessarily paid to do careful and thoughtful planning time, right? I work with teachers who sometimes have paid 15 minutes for a 3-hour class, and we know that's not sufficient many times. So unpredictable student attendance, absolutely. Unclear expectations, sometimes from administrators. And then I appreciate the comment about perhaps the goals that students have being different than those that the program may have or the state may have. I also saw in the chat a lack of training or confidence in lesson planning, like not quite sure how to do it, right? And then I think I have seen, I didn't see this in the chat, but maybe this rings true, kind of I can wing it, I'm good, like kind of pattern that teachers can get into, a confidence that grows with time. But that also keeps us from really being thoughtful sometimes as well. Let's see if anything else popped up in the chat. Feel free to keep adding. So given the things you just mentioned, on the next slide, I'll invite you to find your chat box again and think about like how do you in your state support lesson planning? Like what is it that's happening in your state to help teachers do this very, very difficult task, right? What do you notice? So for example, it might be that certain lessons are required to be turned in once in a while, or maybe there's some kind of training that you provide, or maybe you provide templates of some kind. Maybe there are set lesson plans that your teachers or volunteers are asked or perhaps even required to use. Let's take a moment. Yep, I'm seeing templates, PD on lesson planning, professional learning community, even providing the very lesson plan. Yep. Great. Sharing with each other, using the TSTM template. Yep, great. Excellent. All right, well, thank you. And continue using that chat box. That's a great way for us to continue to think together throughout this session, because I know a lot of you in the participant list, and there's a lot of brain power in this webinar, so let's take advantage. So I want to share 2 key concepts and then 1 big initiative during my time with you. And the 2 key concepts are going to be learning targets and line of inquiry. And so our purpose today is not to give you the whole nuts and bolts of how to lesson plan. That's not the purpose. But as fellow state leaders, to share some insights, hopefully, and maybe some things that could make that work a little bit lighter. So the concepts, again, learning targets and then line of inquiry. And in my experience, working with these 2 ideas can really up a teacher's lesson planning game plan, and in turn, of course, makes for a better experience for our learners. So learning targets is a daily practice, and then line of inquiry actually zooms out to the unit planning level, but can really impact the daily work of the classroom. So let's dig in. So learning targets are, and you may have seen these, you may do these, this might be very familiar to you, or it may not be. So I can statements, right? Learning target statements really empower students. They provide a common focus. They communicate what is important. They help to build community and engagement, and of course, increase motivation and confidence. So back when I was in grad school and in my early years of teaching, it was all about SWBAT, S-W-B-A-T. The students will be able to, right? And that was what we were asked to fill out all the time, it seems. Lesson goals and statements that really are meant for teacher consumption. So students will be able to do blank, 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 right? And they often use the language of the standards being taught. And for sure, there's a place for that, right? Absolutely, these are important, but they're generally really just for teachers for their internal daily planning. In contrast, though, learning targets should be student friendly, right? They should be shared with students. They're generally phrased in I can statements, and they're shared up front at the top of the room, in the front of the board, right? With students, and maybe even checked off throughout the lesson. Not necessarily an agenda, but something we have achieved during our time together in the classroom. So for example, I can call a manager or a teacher to say that I'm sick and cannot come to work or school. So I come from an ESOL background. That was a pretty common one. I can, for more advanced students, use a semicolon to link to or more closely related independent clauses. Or maybe I can divide a fraction by a whole number, right? So statements like that are student friendly and can show what students are learning. So on the next slide, some things about learning targets. So they are accomplished usually in one day, maybe a few at most. So they're pretty small, specific to the what and how of the lesson. And they generally have like a noun and a verb in a very specific, specified context. They're not long-term learning goals for like a semester or something. They're not global or ambiguous, and they're not lacking one of those components. So there's some detail involved with those. So for example, I think one thing that's helpful to see is like, it's all about the verbs, right? So on the next slide, we see a way of thinking about these that involves the depth of knowledge, DOK. This comes from Webb. And when we talk to teachers about learning targets, often, and maybe you have found this as well in your teacher training, often the tendency is to name the activities in the lesson. So I can complete worksheet number 12, or I can fill out the mingle, or I can complete an info gap, right? So activities and thinking about activities are a new or inexperienced teacher's go-to, like in my experience. That's where they go is, oh, we're going to do this, this, and this in this lesson in sort of a activity agenda focused way. And it totally makes sense. Like it's very concrete, it's comfortable. They know what they're going to do in the hour and a half or 2 hours that they have, right? It takes some time in training to evolve, I think, as an instructor from thinking about learning targets as an agenda to thinking about them as a list of what students are learning, and then subsequently looking to really think about what is the evidence of that learning that is taking place and how do I collect that? And then all of that takes some time, of course, to develop in instructors, but I find focusing on the learning target verbs can really make a difference. And so one great resource is for thinking and planning is choosing verbs, for example, from this depth of knowledge wheel. You've likely seen this, but I've included it in the reference sheet that, oh, thanks Long for dropping that in the chat. So it helps us move from activity-based lessons toward deeper thinking, increased rigor, and really more purposeful class time. So that DOK whale is this particular one I think I found on the New Jersey Department of Education, but it's certainly not unique to that state. And the depth of knowledge, it's a handy kind of way to think about instead of just my students will learn blank, well, they will create this, they will classify this. I can argue this, I can create this thing, I can recall this, I can categorize this, right? So it helps us get a little more concrete. Just gonna pause there and check the chat, see if there's anything else cropping up here. And if you haven't yet, you might want to grab that PDF that Long just dropped in the chat. That has a link, or I'm sorry, it's a PDF with all of the links for the things that Don and I are sharing today. Thanks, Bev, absolutely. Yeah. So the next idea I want to throw at you is line of inquiry. And I love line of inquiry. It's one of my favorite things to talk about. And just briefly, I want to be sure it's something that's on your radar. And if you haven't yet, maybe something to think about providing professional development around. So it can be a lesson planning game changer in my experience. So a line of inquiry is a way of organizing instruction. And it in fact is the thread that ties multiple lessons together. So it's a little bit more than saying, we're going to do a food unit, right? Super typical ESL unit, right? A food unit, talking about all the food groups, or maybe a volcanoes unit in a science GED class. So a line of inquiry is kind of akin to essential questions. In fact, I see those as fairly interchangeable that help connect content for learners and help teachers to plan a cohesive unit. So the beauty of a line of inquiry is that it works well when there is turbulent attendance, as was mentioned in the chat, right? Students come as they're able. They're all adulting hard out there. They come when they can, and students can still jump into this topic that's meaty and worthy of their time at different entry points. Because you're working with a line of inquiry over a period of time, it's sort of an instructional arch. So students are exposed again and again to key concepts, vocabulary, and skills, and they continue to kind of dig into a meaty topic. And when you're using a line of inquiry to tie lessons together, the lessons are interconnected, but they're not necessarily interdependent, which works in an adult ed setting, of course. And usually it ends with some sort of culminating project or writing prompt or some sort of thing to show evidence of learning. So just as an example, in the next slide, we've got the food shopping unit. Not unusual, right? That we would do that with a group of adult ESL learners, for example. But what if we were to shift that to how can I feed my family healthy food within my budget? So it answers a big central question about the content area, establishes a purpose for learning. It also provides opportunities for students to evaluate and synthesize information from a variety of sources, right? So they can learn about food deserts, they can compare coupons, they can, look at the circular from the local grocery stores and such, instead of just naming foods, which might be the tendency if we just have a food unit, as opposed to answering this bigger kind of important question. So it provides a lesson and coherence among those lessons. So a line of inquiry typically isn't for a single lesson, but if a teacher has a solid, interesting, juicy line of inquiry, she is able to follow it for a few days, and the lesson planning sort of kind of comes together because you're working within this larger unit. So consider the difference then, like the food shopping unit, and then how can I feed my family healthy in a certain budget. So let's take a look at some examples. What makes a speech powerful? So these are all from social studies, just to offer some variation here. I know you all are involved with all the things out in your context. So in a unit that maybe would have been dubbed the 1960s, maybe kind of blandly moved through historic events with a lot of reading thrown in, what if the line of inquiry was what makes a speech powerful? And students look at a speech with excerpts maybe from MLK and RFK and John Lewis and Obama and make connections. A few more examples. Can nonviolence bring about social change? How can one person bend history? What is the role of media in social change? And this one, I asked a colleague what he was working on lately, a social studies colleague, and he named this as his line of inquiry, and like, talk about a juicy topic, huh? Super interesting, and interesting for a variety of nations that might be represented in your class, if you have a diverse class of home countries. He was working on how do assassinations and untimely deaths affect a country and shape a nation. And imagine kind of the things you could read and compare and write about and talk about in such a unit. So the line of inquiry lends itself beautifully to the standards, whatever standards you're using in your state. It moves us into really choosing engaging topics and readings. And as we know, with any standards work, it's all about asking questions that are worth answering and reading texts that are worth reading. So let's pause there. And then from your vantage point, let me have you find your keyboard again and share in the chat. What would be the impact on students if teachers started focusing on using learning targets and lines of inquiry as part of their lesson planning? So these may be familiar to you or maybe not, and we want our teachers to integrate this kind of stuff in their lesson planning. What would be the impact, or maybe what has been the impact, if that's work that you have done in your state? I'll give you a moment. It helps them to think for themselves, analyze, form opinions based on text, which is absolutely putting the standards into practice. Great. Critical thinking enhanced. Thank you. One of the things I have found when teachers start working with line of inquiry in particular is it's so much more fun. It's more interesting. Instead of kind of moving through topics you've done again and again, suddenly you're like looking for different kinds of readings, and you're asking different kinds of questions, and you're asking for different kinds of evidence. And the final products that students come up with are often just like deeper. There's more happening there, as our colleagues in the chat mentioned. Learners might use their own experience and viewpoint, and they'll also choose viewpoints that they have since read about if you're using a line of inquiry well. Increase student participation, absolutely. And then not to forget about learning targets. Some teachers I've talked to, once they've kind of started using learning targets really deliberately in their classrooms, say it offers so much clarity that students feel like they know what they're coming to class for and know what they're leaving with. Which is just a powerful thing, right? I imagine, I don't know that there have been studies done on this, but that it would increase student enrollment and retention and attendance, perhaps. Bev says this would help move a lesson from activity to a lesson based on critical thinking. Yeah, I would agree with that. Develop deeper thinking skills, potential to connect with a topic. I also think it connects to what we know about good adult learning and teaching, right? That when adult students have topics that are really worthy of their time and attention, and that are relevant and immediately relevant, that it will be more engaging, and therefore more learning, of course, takes place. Great, thank you. So those were the two ideas, learning targets and line of inquiry. And I also want to make sure that this initiative is on your radar. So teaching skills that matter in adult education. Just quickly, has your state participated in TSTM? Because many have. Go ahead and tell us. And maybe just type your state in the in the chat so we know which state, since we won't immediately know who's from where. Arizona, Oregon, Vermont's joining us soon, Arkansas, yep, Massachusetts. Excellent. Alaska, great. Tennessee. Kansas. All right. So lots of you are already familiar, so I will not spend much time here, but just to be sure this is on your radar, when we talk about lesson planning, TSTM should come to mind, right? Because there's really great stuff there. So of course, this is a professional development activity from At.the, organized by AIR, and it focused on improving instruction to build the skills adult learners need, of course, to match the critical domains within their lives. So it's focused on a handful of things, the skills that matter, and they are here. And if you have participated in TSTM, these are very familiar to you. And I noticed in the previous discussion, critical thinking came up a lot. I would argue that respecting differences in diversity and communication, processing and analyzing information, like all of those will come up in some of those social studies examples that I shared. So there's also 5 topic areas that if your state has been a part of this, you will see on the next slide, we've got civics education, digital literacy, financial literacy, health literacy, and of course, workforce preparation. So these are the 5 topic areas. Previously, you saw the central skills. And then finally, they are organized and presented in terms of approaches that work. And those are project-based learning, problem-based learning, and integrated and contextualized instruction. What we know about adult learning and teaching, andragogy, is that it's based on these ideas that students are autonomous, they are self-directed, they have a rich reservoir of life experiences from which to draw, they are goal-oriented, and they have a need to understand the relevance and application of what they're learning. These 3 approaches, partnered with the central skills and of course those 5 topic areas, are just sort of exemplify, they embody what we know about good adult teaching and learning. So as members of TSTM or people who've taken part in that cohort work, you will have learned about these 3 approaches. If you, like Vermont, are joining us soon, this will be part of that training. A couple of things I want to point out from the TSTM work, a couple of resources. One is the unit overview tool, and the other is the lesson planning tool. Oh, you're so on it. Thank you, Long. So the unit overview tool is this. I'm not going to go into it because you've either seen it or you're about to in the training, but I do want to point out that line of inquiry is already on here. Like we already know how important line of inquiry is. Thank you. So the essential questions that form the thread that hold the unit together. So that's just part of what we know about good teaching and learning for lesson planning, and TSTM has already incorporated that into the work. And then, yeah, click over to the lesson planning tool. You'll notice further down that we actually include, oh, that second box actually, the learning target statements are written, so it's just under the approximate length of lesson at the top. Learning target statements are written in student-friendly language and help the learner reflect what they are able to do as a result of the lesson. So things like learning exit tickets and logs or reflections, right? So these ideas of line of inquiry and learning targets are already part of the TSTM work. All right, I'll let you flip back over to the slides, and thanks again for dropping the information about the toolkit there. So Marcella, did you want to say a little about the upcoming cohorts on the next slide? Or I can, whichever.
Sorry, no, yes, I'm happy to share a little bit about that, although I'll also invite Cherise Moore, who is on.
Yeah, for sure.
And is the director, she'd like to say some words. But we are really excited. We have a couple of TSTM cohorts taking place in 2022 to 2023. Cohort 5 is happening now. As you heard, Vermont will be joining us, as well as 5 other states. We are launching we launched rather September 21st, and we will be running this cohort until April 23rd, 2022. And we just announced, I think as of Friday, this past week, that cohort 6 will be starting soon. We're going to be accepting applications for spring of 2023. The applications are due November 30th, 2022. So if you're interested in having your state participate in this next cohort, we encourage you to fill out the application, and we will be sharing that. We can share that link, I think, in the chat. And we'll have the training and coaching will run from January to June 2023. So just a quick plug for that exciting project.
Yeah, thank you. And I believe at this point we go to Donna.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me?
Yeah, you sound great.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. It's good to see such a diverse group of educators here today. In my short time with you today, I would like to focus on 3 things. I'm going to start by providing just a little bit of context about how we're set up in Massachusetts in terms of support for lesson planning and as part of our PD system in general. I will then describe briefly how the pandemic shifted our thinking around support for lesson planning and the process we used to make some changes, and then I will briefly describe the resulting products of that work. So can we go to the next slide? Thank you. So a little bit of context. In Massachusetts, our state office has a dedicated staff member whose role is to be the liaison to the 3 curriculum and instruction PD centers that we fund. And this staff, that would be me, and the PD centers staff work together collaboratively to ensure that policies for curriculum and instruction are informed by teacher needs and that they're communicated clearly and implemented consistently. We fund 3 curriculum and instruction PD centers for ELA, math, and ESOL support, as well as an additional PD center for educational leadership, and which is responsible for supporting program leaders to implement an educator growth and evaluation model. Further, we have another dedicated staff in the state office that's responsible for coordinating the entire professional development system, which is 5 centers, PD centers, and ensuring that these centers work together towards a common goal of supporting educators to increase student outcomes. In general, we seek to align our PD offerings to 7 elements of effective PD that we think effective PD should be. And these are, we try in pretty much every PD that we offer to be content focused, to incorporate active learning, to support collaboration among teachers, to provide space for teachers to receive input and feedback and to reflect on the feedback. We try to provide models of our exemplars. I'll talk about those in a little bit, because those include lesson plan models and curriculum unit exemplars. We try to provide also coaching and expert support. Our curriculum and instruction centers have coaches that are available at any time, no cost, and they can support teachers with individualized needs. And of course, last but not least, we believe that effective PD should be of sustained duration, and it should provide teachers with adequate time to learn, practice, and implement and reflect upon the new strategies that they learned, and that will hopefully facilitate changes in their practice. Next slide. So our support for teachers, of course, doesn't exist in a void, and our priorities for curriculum and instruction are informed by a variety of data sources. We look at data from site visits and monitorings. We call them program quality reviews. We publish an annual report, which we call an annual summative PQR reports, that also identifies statewide needs for curriculum and instruction. We look, of course, at the measurable skill gains data, and we have multiple conversations with the field, with stakeholders in our field. Some examples are, we hold monthly director sharing groups, quarterly state as a partner webinars, or annual directors meetings. And of course, we have frequent discussions with our PD provider partners. So all these support us to gather data, identify teacher needs, prioritize those needs, and then provide targeted support. In Massachusetts, can we go to the next slide? In Massachusetts, historically, we have always provided support for new and veteran teachers around curriculum design and lesson planning in the major content areas of ELA, math, and ESOL. And our focus has traditionally been on support around alignment to standards, instructional shifts, and backwards design. So over the years, we have put out numerous tools and such as templates for curriculum scope and sequence, curriculum units, lesson planning templates, exemplar lessons, unit curriculum units, and of course, corresponding PD to support implementation of these tools. Additionally, several years ago, our math PD provider At.there created a statewide math curriculum that we call CALM, which stands for Curriculum for Adults Learning Math. Thank you, Long. The link is in the chat if you're willing to explore it. And this is a curriculum that is available for free to our educators, our math teachers, with beautifully crafted curriculum units and lesson plans that can be adapted to the circumstances of each program, but really that focuses on supporting teachers to teach math and how to teach math conceptually, and is accompanied by a CALM PD series to help teachers deepen their understanding of the content of this curriculum, the teaching strategies, and the overall organization of the curriculum. So with this little bit of history, I do believe that by offering this kind of PD support and tools, over the years, we made big strides in advancing classroom instruction and the quality and alignment of curricular materials in our adult education programs. However, recently we felt that some shifts needed to take place, and these shifts were pandemic triggered, and what data showed us and data triggered. So we thought a sharper emphasis on lesson planning was needed, and sort of looking at lesson planning from different lens. Because the pandemic brought on changes to the teacher workforce, it had become a little bit harder to find and retain teachers than before, and teaching retention challenges also triggered the need for different types of PD support. And for example, we found that not so many of our teachers were able to attend the long sustained PD that we so strongly believed in, because of all the multiple challenges brought on by the pandemic and other realities. And so they needed shorter, more specific, and more targeted PD. And also the COVID-19 pandemic also brought on major shifts to the instructional models that we used to know. And our teachers needed more support with integration of digital literacy skills. And when we analyzed our data, we noticed statewide that we have been serving a higher number of English learners in the AB content area classes. And so we needed to provide teachers more guidance around culturally responsive teaching practices, contextualization of learning, and how to support these learners with specific language skills and scaffolding support. So we started asking ourselves, what is it that we could do differently so that we're able to support teachers to use a variety of digital tools in their lesson planning that would align to the objectives of the lesson and would enhance student learning, contextualize learning in content relevant to adult learners, and 3, better support students' specific needs and English learners. We can go to the next slide. So one way to tackle those questions was for us to really look at what we already had in place and kind of look through different lenses and revise them in view of the new realities we were living, and provide more specific guidance. And I will speak about the results of that revision process in a little bit, but it was important for us that before we started doing any work, that clear expectations had to be agreed upon by all stakeholders, so that we're all on the same page. We had frequent communication with our PD providers, and for clarity and consistency in messaging. And we also use what we call here a state as a partner approach. And on the next slide, I'll talk a little bit about that. So this shows kind of the workflow process that illustrates our state as a partner approach, where we believe that we do better work when we're working in a collegial environment where multiple perspectives are honored, there's transparency, information is made available, we listen to each other before we make decisions. And we believe that this approach can really improve our ability to be of better service to our students. And we use this approach when we revise the curriculum and lesson planning tools we had in place to reflect the new priorities and realities. And in the state as a partner process, the curriculum and instruction state priorities were informed by data and perspectives from multiple stakeholders. The liaison for curriculum and instruction and the state liaison and the PD centers met regularly. The curriculum and instruction coaches, I'm so sorry, the light went off in this conference room. I have to move a little bit so I can turn it back on. Sorry about that. The curriculum and instruction coaches worked together on revising the templates and providing the PD, and then the tools were approved at the state level, released, and the PD centers are providing targeted support for the implementation of these tools. We can move on to the next one. So this is a screenshot of our revised lesson planning template for ELA. We're in the process of revising ESOL and possibly math. And it can be used to create exemplar lessons. It can be adapted. And like all the tools we created, it comes with a companion guide. And in the chat box, I see a link, thank you, to our webpage where you can see all of these resources. When you click on the link on that link on our website, it will take you to all the planning templates and the companion guides. And you will see that for each template, there's a companion guide where we provide more guidance on what each component of a lesson plan or a unit plan or a scope and sequence plan. And in each companion guide, you will see we have two parts. The first section, we call it the basics, and the second part, we call it the lenses. And in the basics, we provide more guidance related to standards-based teaching. For example, is the unit or the lesson built around standards? Do they include a mix of reading, writing, speaking, and listening skills standards? Student materials, more guidance around student materials. Are the texts at an appropriate level for the state GLE range, usability, but also in the lenses section, and that's where we wanted to make sure that the state priorities for curriculum and instruction are reflected. In the lenses section, we provide more guidance related to contextualization and relevance. Things such as, do the unit topics or the lesson plan topics represent real life contexts in which the skills, the ELA skills, are used by adults. We provide more guidance on evidence-based instruction, including evidence-based reading instruction. Also, differentiated instruction is one of the big priorities that we have now in our state. Are there adequate supports to help teachers differentiate instruction to meet the needs of individual learners, including English learners, which is one of the priority populations here, and those with learning differences. More guidance on culturally responsive teaching practices. We invite teachers to think about how they connect content in a lesson to the students' lives or to what students already know. Do the resources that teachers choose and select for the lesson or the unit, do they include authors or images and ideas from more than one perspective and culture? Are cultural representations and different perspectives included in the unit? And are they fair and accurate? Are stereotypes avoided? So things like that, just to kind of make teachers aware of all of these perspectives and what to think about when, not only to think about standards alignment, but also all of these other lenses that we think are important. And last but not least, there's more guidance that we thought would be needed around integration of digital literacy and technology. And we're trying to draw teachers' attention to the use of technology, how technology is connected to the learning objectives of the lesson, and do students do at least one of the following in the unit or the lesson? Do they find and read digital text? Do they use digital tools to organize their learning or tasks? Do they evaluate the validity of online sources? Do they use digital tools to create and present products? Things like that. Various questions that we hope will trigger the teachers to think about these perspectives as well. In the next slide, you will see another screenshot of our lesson planning guidance. And here we revised this to provide more detail on lesson objectives, for example. What do they indicate what learners will be able to do by the end of the lesson? Do they align to the standards and things like that? Assessment also has more guidance, and also a section that we call instructional moves, where we are drawing teachers' attention on, teachers are prompted to think about, do students understand what their learning focuses in each lesson and how it relates to the larger unit? Teachers are asked to think about, how to review key concepts from the previous lessons at the beginning of the lesson, think about a clear and logical progression from more scaffolding to less, and also think about, reflect at the end of the lesson, and also include student reflection on their learning as well. I think we can go to the next slide now. Our PD centers provide a variety of back-to-school resources and these are to be found for our educators, find them on the specific center page for our SABIS system, for our PD system. Long is putting all of these resources in the chat. Thank you. So there's a lot that we provide our teachers with, but today I want to focus on one of them that I think it's more relevant to our webinar today, and that is the Professional Adult Educator course. This course describes what effective student-centered teaching looks like, and offers hands-on activities focused on lesson planning in particular. And it is important for us because it bridges the content standards and the professional standards. In Massachusetts, we have professional standards for teachers, for ABE teachers, and ESOL teachers, and that show what teachers should know and be able to do for effective ESOL instruction or math instruction or ELA instruction. It's a course that we all our educators have access to. It's about 6.5 hours spread over 4 sessions, which are a mix of synchronous and asynchronous, and in which teachers are asked to create a lesson plan that demonstrates an understanding of backwards design and includes components of effective teaching. Then they receive feedback on their lesson plan from a designated content area instructional coach, and together they begin to engage in a reflective teaching practice and discussions with colleagues in an online community of practice. Recently, we have revised some of our standards to focus more on lesson planning and strategies around lesson planning, and also to include strategies on remote lesson planning. So if you go on the page of our SABIS professional development system, our teachers will see a lot of offerings on how to design an effective remote lesson plan if they teach remotely or in a hybrid mode. Next slide, thank you. Looking to the future in Massachusetts, we think that our work on supporting curriculum and instruction obviously never stops, and we consider these tools that I talked about today, kind of live documents. We will continue to refine them, to add and talk with our teachers and make them better and better. And while we may add other revisions to the ELA ones that I just spoke about, our short-term goals are now to look at the ESOL ones and the math ones. And we're also looking on ways to integrate more components from the TSTM lesson planning templates into our own lesson planning templates that we have. We are now in year 2 of rolling out TSTM in our state, and we're exploring what this may look like, how we can combine the TSTM lesson planning template with what we already have. And I think this is all from me. If there are any questions, I'm happy to take them. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Such great information. And if you haven't looked at your chat box in a little bit, do Long dropped a bunch of great resources from Donna in Massachusetts. So thank you so much. I'm going to chime in with a few things from the great state of Minnesota that support lesson planning. Many of them will kind of dovetail or be similar to what Donna mentioned, but I tried to choose things that would be different because you already have so many great resources from her here in the resource sheet that maybe we could drop that PDF one more time, Long, and then also the subsequent links that have been shared. So there it is. Thank you. It's like magic. So in Minnesota, some of the things that I'm thinking about are backwards planning and templates and cohort assignments and coaching. And one thing that perhaps is distinct from other states is that in Minnesota adult education, we're run mostly through K-12 school districts, which is not unusual, I realize, but those teaching in adult ed in K-12 districts in the state of Minnesota do have to hold state issued teaching licenses in order to teach there. So there is sort of this built-in teacher preparation and relicensure professional development required in our state. And that's a fortunate reality. We have many licensed and trained teachers doing this work. Sometimes they are trained in something quite different than adult education, but they are trained teachers. So we start with that usually. However, they're often trained in things that are different than the content that they are currently tasked with doing. And so certainly there is still a consistent and fairly intense need for professional development. And some of the ways that we found that are helpful is to think about these areas on your screen. So instructional planning is something that gets a lot of attention in our various initiatives. And today I'll just share a couple of highlights, but we want to think about how we support teachers' lesson planning in the field. And so these areas are what I'll touch on. And you may have heard of backward planning. Certainly you've just been introduced to some templates, and then I'll touch on some cohort assignments and coaching. But first of all, backwards planning. So thinking in terms of units and not just daily lessons. So I realize I'm zooming out again a little bit, not unlike with line of inquiry. It's not daily lesson planning, which of course is the nuts and bolts piece, but daily lesson planning happens in a context of unit planning, which happens in a context of course design, right? So we kind of have to think about all of it and not just what am I going to do on Monday. So when we emphasize backward planning, we're starting with the end in mind, right? So what are your desired results or objectives? Like, what is it you want students to be able to know and be able to do at the end of the course of study or the unit or the day, right? How will you know that they have reached that goal? And what activities then, which is the third thing to think about, what activities will then engage them along the way? And as I mentioned earlier in my remarks, that activities is often where teachers go right away. It's like, oh, I love this story. We totally want to do this story. Or I love this mingle activity. We're going to do that. Well, yay. However, right, what is it that you're actually working toward is a bigger question. And there is a handy YouTube video about backward planning that it's not adult ed context, but it's funny and very clear about why backward planning makes sense. It happens to be about Napoleon. So I've dropped that in the chat. We're not going to take the time to watch it now, but it is worth saving and checking out. So we have a lot of activities at Atlas, and Atlas again is the Minnesota version of Sabes, right? So it's the ABE Teaching and Learning Advancement System. And so on the next slide, you'll see there's a variety of initiatives that we take part in, and I'm sure they're very similar to ones that you do in your state. Things around transition skills, work for administrators, career pathways, CCR, cultural competency, ESL, new staff orientation, numeracy, one-room schoolhouse settings, teaching, reading, and writing. Like there's so many things that we're involved with and that your teachers are pulled to learn about. And I would say that lesson planning really sits well in these three areas. On the next slide, I've circled these, like, of course, it's part of everything. But as far as where we go with professional development, I would say mostly we talk about it in terms of transitions, employability. We call our ACEs work as the academic, career, and employability skills. So that's our transitions framework. And then the career pathways work. Wow, you need to know where you're going if you're doing that work, right? So you have to begin with the end in mind. If the goal is for your students to become certified in such and such a career, you need to know what that is and what's involved and what's the exam look like and what's the clinical part and what's the interview going to look like, right? And then you work backwards from there. And then, of course, in the context of our CCR standards. So we are currently updating our transitions framework for some new lesson planning tools. We wanted to do more emphasis. It's been about 9 years since we rolled that out, and we're going to do more emphasis on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and also add some emphasis on social emotional learning. And then back when we rolled that out, there was no emphasis on online learning or hybrid or high flex instruction. And guess what? Now we need to think about that. And then the final area, I already mentioned the career pathways work, but the final area is around CCR because we are a CCR state. So I want to bring up that this merges well with this job embedded cohort that we run. And I'm going to share a little bit about that in a moment. But the idea that you can't like do standards in a day, you have to think of it as a longer term process, right? So you're not going to hit a standard a day, for example. It takes several lessons, and that's why a line of inquiry is helpful. So in the next slide, I'm just going to share a little bit about that work. So when we have our college and career readiness standards implementation, we have a template that we use, and you'll notice it's quite similar really to the TSTM template. And we use that and have a job embedded year-long cohort. So we just kicked it off this week actually, and then that'll run through May. And part of that cohort is detailed unit planning and lesson planning, and we do provide them with templates. And so those are on your resource sheet. On those templates, we also emphasize line of inquiry. We emphasize lesson objectives, which are those teacher focused and usually standards language. And then we also emphasize learning targets, that EdCan student-friendly language. Another part that we do quite a bit on is within that cohort, there are facilitators for both English language arts and math, and also table coaches for all of the events that, the in-person pieces of that training. And so there's quite a bit of feedback given on lesson planning assignments from the facilitators and also from their peers. And I feel like that's particularly important for those teachers who came into this work from another related field, who don't have a ton of training, but also for those teachers who are licensed teachers, but maybe their training was quite a long time ago or in something else entirely. And now they can get some concentrated focus, feedback, and support in developing principled, thoughtful lesson plans that have the standards in mind. So one thing to keep in mind is those tools that we're sharing, and I also shared the course design guidelines in the chat. They're not meant to be like a daily activity. Like, we realize that a lot of teachers plan lessons on a Post-it note because they kind of have the sense of what they're doing. They know what's up and they just need to keep it straight in their head. But the templates are more involved, right? And they are a learning tool. They're not really meant for daily consumption, but they do help a teacher to think about what needs to be included, particularly, I think, in a unit, and then also if you drill down to the daily work. So all of those are available on your resources or in the chat, so grab those links as they come up. And I just wanted to go through one last tidbit here. And this, I happen to be teaching a graduate level course for Hamlin right now. It's an introduction to adult basic education. It's part of our larger adult basic ed license that we offer online. And there are a couple of modules on lesson planning. And one of them is specifically around numeracy. And so thinking about math and numeracy instruction. And since so many adult educators are less accustomed to teaching numeracy than to teaching other things, reading and writing and English as a second language are pretty typical ways into the field. Numeracy, I find there are not as many trained math teachers in the state as there are trained reading teachers, for example. And so I developed this lesson planning template for numeracy focused lesson plan to really walk people through the process. And one of the things we start with is to just name a time that you have used math in your life recently. And so I'm actually going to invite you, because we're an hour in and I want you to find your keyboard again. When is a time that you, yes, you, have used math in your life recently? Maybe today. So for example, using a coupon, sketching out a garden. Did you refinance a house recently? Did you have to cut a recipe in half? Did you talk to a friend about health department statistics? Is one that comes up a lot. So I'm looking to the chat. I need a couple of examples of when you have used math recently. How much does everyone owe on a dinner bill? Good. What time you had to leave the house to pick up kids through DC traffic, Marcella? Good. Household budget, banking, home improvement projects, time zones. Yes, thank you. Submitting a budget request, balancing your checkbook. Excellent. All of that. Yes, thank you. I've recently been battling a little bit with my insurance company on getting a, the in-network versus out-of-work benefits, and all of that involves quite a bit of math and numeracy. Grading, house renovation, paying bills. Great, thank you. And so what this lesson planning template does, the cost of not calculating a time zone. Thanks, Rebecca. So what this little lesson planning thing I came up with for this graduate class does is kind of walk people from that point that you just named through a whole lesson plan. So I'm going to let you just pull that up if you would. And so you just did the first part, right? Which was think of a time you've used math in your life recently. And then I asked the students, and again, these are graduate students, they're you and me, right? They're just people out in the world doing adult education. So describe an authentic adult literacy, or I'm sorry, adult numeracy moment. So what is it that took place? I had someone tell me she was having to buy enough boards to refinish her deck or something like that, right? And then someone else was buying a frame for a drawing their kid had done that's super unusually sized, so stuff like that. And then number 3, find the corresponding math standard in your favorite CCRS book, right? Or your standards that your state holds. So this is not easy, right? It's how do you go from, well, I need to buy this canvas to what standard is that? And teachers really stumble, they really have to think. And those standards in the blue book, the beloved blue book, are not always easy to interpret, right? So this is hard. And then I ask them to find and post a link to a brief video about this math concept. So we had the great Joey Lehrman speak at one of our conferences very recently, 2 years ago, and I hope I quoted him very closely, if not word for word. He said, I could lecture, but there's a 90% chance that someone on the internet has explained it way more clearly already. And so I love that quote, and he's not wrong, right? So if you can find a YouTube or a Khan Academy or some other video and that explains that very concept, and then I have them post it right there, right? So there's zero reason that you have to figure out how to explain a concept to your students. Someone else has probably figured out how to do it very clearly, and you can use it, right? It's not stealing, it's effective. So scroll down, if you would, and you'll see then we go to now use your CCRS book. Find the standard again. Where is it? Are you sure you're still working on the same standard? And now what happens before it, what the level below, and what happens after? So really getting at that math practice of, or that shift of coherence, right? We know that the math shifts are just so important, that focus, rigor, and coherence. What happens before? What if students don't understand? They won't be able to do it. And then once they've got it, what's next? What's the next piece to that you can build upon? And then think of a way you might introduce this numeracy content to an adult learner, a group of learners. How would you capture their attention, right? So putting a bunch of problems on a worksheet necessarily and handing it out, maybe not super fun, right? So how can you capture their attention to get them interested in that math topic? And I think there might be 1 or 2 more things below there. Thank you. Outline how you might introduce the concept and show the video, how are you going to introduce this? That's the explanation phase. And then in keeping with good lesson planning everywhere, what's the guided practice? And then the extended practice. How will you help them develop procedural skill and fluency, which we know is a component of rigor? And then what can they do increasingly independently to extend or deepen their understanding, and also transfer this math skill to another authentic context. So moving into that deeper sense of rigor and extended practice. So, and then voila, you've created a numeracy lesson plan, right? By just starting with something that you actually had to tackle in your own adult life, and then kind of working through these steps. So I wanted to share that little tidbit. It seems to be working. I work with a lot of teachers who've never taught math before, and I want them to come up with a numeracy focused lesson plan, and they're able to do it. So that's exciting. I'll let you go back to the slides, Long. So at this point, I just want to pause, and I think we have time, Marcella, for some questions and answers. So I'll just stay here, and Donna, maybe you can come on camera as well and see if there are things that we can say more about or clarify.
Thanks, Patsy and Donna. And yes, I encourage anyone who has any questions for Patsy or Donna about how they're supporting the teachers in their states around lesson planning or just generally best practices related to this topic. You want to type those into the chat. We can benefit from our experts who are with us today. Or if you'd like, if you want to raise your hand, sometimes it's easier to just say it out loud. You raise your hand, I can call on you. So we have our first question is from Valerie. She asks, how is the lesson planning process monitored to ensure it's used?
Right, I'm not sure which specific thing you're referring to, Valeria, but in Minnesota, no one is collecting lesson plans. That is, like, the state does not do that. I can speak to, like, in our cohort work, for example, the CCRS implementation cohort, the facilitators are giving direct feedback to the participants throughout the year. As far as how in Minnesota, at least, it falls to the managers. And so we do a lot of observation and mentoring and such, but it's not something that's monitored by the state specifically. Donna, do you want to say more?
Yeah, we don't do that in Massachusetts either. We don't, I mean, when we go on site visits, for example, we have a group of program specialists and we conduct yearly site visits, and we do observe classes as part of our site visit process. And we ask to see the lesson plans for the class that we observe, not as a monitoring tool or as a compliance tool, but more for us to understand what we're observing. But we don't, we don't even have a policy, like we don't say use this template that the state is giving you. The template is a recommended template, lesson planning template, but they don't have to use that one. If they have one that works better for them, that is fine. We do recommend that a lesson planning template should have certain components, but we don't monitor the use, and we leave that up to the local program directors to do that if they see fit for their program.
Great, thank you. It does sound though as if, although there isn't monitoring, you've created an environment where there is an understanding of the value of it. One more question we received from, I think this is from Beth. Because most adult educators come into adult ed sideways, what are some strategies for training administrators who do not have an educational background? Donna, do you want to speak to that?
Yes, so in Massachusetts, this is a question that we try to answer for a lot of times, and we have several PD supports. So we have one center that is the supports program leaders, program directors, and we have an orientation for an annual orientation for new program directors. We have a lot of PD that supports, especially for those that don't have an educational background. And we also provide PD support in the professional standards for directors, for program leaders and administrators to understand what effective teaching looks like. And we have specific PD related to the professional standards targeted to educational leaders.
How about you, Patsy?
Yeah, I'm just dropping in the chat. Give me 1 second. A couple things. So when it comes, and I would say a lot of our work centers around standards implementation. I know in Arizona you're busy with that as well. But one thing we have developed and then use in the cohort project for implementation is an observation tool. So let me grab that because that can, I totally agree. Like many administrators come into this work from, being leaders in other capacities, not necessarily from the classroom, right? Some do, but not all. So let me grab that. I have one, there's one for ELA and then one for math, and that might be helpful just to get a sense. But having these observation tools helps administrators or peer observers, right? Mentors, et cetera. Might be evaluative, maybe not, to know what they are even looking for, what are the look fors, and so that can help with the lesson plan as well. And like Donna mentioned, generally, managers are asking for a detailed lesson plan for the lesson they're observing, but not for every day, right? So, and it's more to just follow along and to know what the purpose and learning targets are for that particular day so that they know what to expect and how to give great feedback. So giving feedback to teachers is something we've done PD around. Giving feedback to, fellow adults is hard, right? It's part of the work. And often, you're right, is not something we're trained to do. So we've done some workshops and such around that. And then this observation tool can be helpful as well. Yeah.
Could I add one more thing? In Massachusetts, we're currently working on putting out a set of tools for class observation, and we're going to release them in May. But also, we have what we call the adult educator, the Massachusetts ABE, Educator Growth and Effectiveness System. And in that course, we have a track for teachers, track for program directors, and a track for coaches. So the programs that want to adopt that model, the EGE model, also have access to some training for those administrators through that. Thank you.
And this next year at this time, I will have more, but we're working on launching a mentoring and observation task force, and that's going to meet this spring in Minnesota. And then we'll have tools and processes related to how to be a good mentor and how to observe classes and help people along. And lesson planning, of course, is not the only part of that, but lesson planning together with instructional targets would be part of that work. And so we're excited to dig into that work in 2023.
And I did want to mention, since you were talking about mentoring and observing and observation tools through the Promoting Teacher Effectiveness project, although it is a little bit older, it is available through links on that the links federal initiatives page for state resources. We do have a mentoring tool that's available through there as well.
Which we are drawing from in our state for sure. So thank
Wonderful.
you for doing that work.
Always good to hear. So I'm going to pause just one more moment, see if we have any additional questions. I'm not seeing any, so I have for all of you a question on the next slide. If you could just take a moment and reflect on all the wonderful information you just heard from Donna and Patsy, and share in the chat your takeaway. What is one strategy, tool, or structure you heard about today that you would like to use to better address barriers to and further support lesson planning in your state? If you see me smiling, it's I see line of inquiry has already come up, and I know, as Patsy said earlier, it's her favorite topic. So it's exciting to see that that's coming up as a takeaway that many of you share. Great. And I'm excited to see Bev shared. I plan on blocking time to explore all the resources shared today. And I am encourage all of you to take a look at those that have been shared in the chat or through that document that Long shared in the chat earlier, and perhaps can upload one more time into the chat for our participants to easily access. We have our fantastic presenters put together some really great resources for us that I hope will be really helpful for all of you. All right, let's see. So if we can go to the next slide. There's been a lot of engagement today, and we wanted to take a quick poll and find out, are you interested in continued support on this topic? As you know, this is, and I mentioned at the beginning, part of our Universal Technical Assistance webinar series, but we are always looking to see how we can further support the field and build your capacity in this area and other areas. So we're looking to see if there's interest perhaps in additional technical assistance in this topic. All right. Well, great. Thanks for letting us know. It looks like many of you are interested, and we'll be reaching out to you to discuss a little bit further how we can support you in this area. Okay, and that serves as a reminder to me to mention yet again that we have our links and technical assistance opportunities on the slide. You'll see it's a snapshot that summarizes some of our professional development opportunities that we offer through links. You can select from previously offered TA on different topics, and we encourage you to request technical assistance using the form that Long put into the chat. If you have questions about the types of training and technical assistance opportunities that there are, we encourage you to email us at training@links.ed.gov. With that, I want to let you know a little bit about next month's webinar, Improving Alignment to Support Post-Secondary Transitions. This will be held on October 26th, 2022. It will start just like today's session at 3 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific time, and run to about 4:30 p.m. Eastern, 1:30 p.m. Pacific time. I encourage you to register now just so that you don't forget, using the link that Long put into the chat. And since this is really a topic that has become increasingly of interest in the field, we want to make sure that we're meeting your needs. So if you could share with us in the chat what questions you have about this topic of improving alignment to support post-secondary transitions, we will share those with the speakers, with our presenters, and make sure that those get addressed. All right. I think that with that, I just want to thank you all for attending today's webinar. I want to thank Patsy and Donna for their fantastic presentations. I always love hearing Patsy talk about best practices related to all things teaching. And I really enjoyed hearing from Donna and Patsy both about what they have going on in their state in this really important topic that has so many challenges, as Patsy mentioned at the beginning, but there are incredible resources available to help and build capacity within our states. Thank you to all of you for attending today's webinar, and I hope that we will see you and that you'll join us next month.
Thank you, Marcella. And thank you, Long, for all the tech support.
Thank you.